Gordon, and I'm the head of water sanitation and hygiene at WHO at the World Health Organization. And I wanted to welcome you to this session on state of the world's drinking water. And this is a session that WHO is convening with its partners, the World Bank and UNICEF. And what I have up on the screen is a little bit of an indication of how we'll run our program today, so you have an idea of what to expect. First, we're going to hear a little bit about the report and another welcome from Kellyanne Naylor from UNICEF. And then we're really blessed with Minister of Water Resources of Iraq and other of Iran, I'm very sorry, and our other colleagues from government agencies that are dealing with regulation. Now, then we're going to hear from other colleagues dealing with other stakeholders dealing with advancing the water agenda. And then finally, we're going to hear a moderation and closing from our colleagues in the Netherlands. So with that, I would like to ask Jennifer, or I would like to ask Kellyanne to say our welcoming.
Distinguished speakers, co-hosts, and participants, both online and in person, to this World Water Week session on the state of the world's drinking water. My name is Kellyanne Naylor, and I'm UNICEF's Director for Water Supply, Sanitation, and Hygiene, Climate, Environment, and Disaster Risk Reduction. I'm delighted to introduce this session that will focus on a piece of work that the World Health Organization, the World Bank, and UNICEF have been working on together to develop the first ever State of the World's Drinking Water Report. We plan for this report to be formally launched in October during the President of the General Assembly's preparatory meeting for the UN 2023 Water Conference in New York. We hope it will provide recommendations to inform the policy and action dialogue of member states and key stakeholders. It's also an opportunity to have a report that finalizes a trilogy that was initiated 2 years ago, where we first launched the State of the World Sanitation Report during the World Toilet Day event in New York with a group of friends of water, followed by the State of the World's Hygiene Report that was launched last year, inspired by the response to the COVID-19 pandemic. And we've completed it now with this final report on the state of the world's drinking water, the third pillar of WASH. But why, you might ask, do we need another water report? And why in particular this report now? The first reason is that we need to accelerate progress. And as we've said many times, unless we quadruple our investments and our progress by 2030, we will not meet our SDG commitment of universal access to safely managed drinking water by 2030. A second reason, and that many of us are familiar with, is we face a triple crisis. We've endured a health crisis, a climate crisis, and now the economic recovery, which is putting at risk the progress that was made over the last few years. We face the possibility of a reversal of progress. Climate change is already driving water scarcity and droughts, while flooding disrupts supplies and devastates communities. The COVID-19 pandemic has re-emphasized the importance of access to safe drinking water, sanitation, and hygiene, not only at household level, but also in healthcare facilities, schools, and other institutions. It's a key pillar to prevent and end public health emergencies. A weak economic recovery will also put at risk the needed investments in the water sector, which also shows that our current state of drinking water is fragile and potentially unsustainable. The third reason is that there's a unique opportunity in history. For the first time in more than 40 years, in 2023, the global community, through the United Nations, will review progress and make firm commitments to renewed action on water and sanitation. 2023 has been called the Year of Water Ambition. And it's our hope that this report will inform these preparatory discussions for the 2023 review and catalyze and inform action by member states and other stakeholders. While much has already been published on this topic, including what has already been published by WHO, UNICEF, and the World Bank, However, this information is spread across many documents and targeted at a variety of stakeholders. We believe that this document we are presenting today will capture and consolidate this knowledge, shared experience, and expertise on this topic. And we hope that this document will also serve to inspire governments, water sector, and non-water sector actors in our common goal to achieve universal access to drinking water supply by 2030 and to move towards a progressive realization of the human rights to safe drinking water for all, irrespective of who they are and where they live. I hope you enjoyed this session today, and more importantly, that you'll join us for this watershed moment to make a significant and lasting change in the drinking water sector for this generation of children and for those to come. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kellyanne Naylor. So she is the head of WASH at UNICEF. And I wanted to be clear with everyone. So the document that we're talking about, we're having the opportunity today to give you a highlight of what's in this document, but the full document will not be released until the President of the General Assembly preparatory meetings on water, which will happen on October 25th. And there are copies of the executive summary with the key recommendations available for you. But what we hope to do today is to give you a little bit of a rundown on what to expect from the report. And again, these recommendations. We've tried to bring together all the evidence all from the JMP. We've tried the Joint Monitoring Program. We've tried to bring you together a sense of what's happening with the enabling environment from data sources such as the UN Water GLAAS and recommendations for the future. And so with that, I'd like to introduce my colleagues. And to start it off, I have Jennifer DeFrance. She's a team leader of drinking water quality and safety at WHO to run us through the report, along with my colleague Joel Kalker from the program. He's a program manager with the World Bank, and Jorge Alvarez Sala, who's a senior advisor for water and climate resiliency with WASH UNICEF. Go ahead.
So very briefly, the report includes a summary of what are the benefits of safe drinking water. As Bruce mentioned, it includes information of what is the current status of safe drinking water services in terms of access to sustainably managed services, as well as looking at the enabling environment around reaching 6.1. Lastly, as highlighted by Bruce, it includes a suite of recommendations that are also supplemented by a number of case studies that highlight good practices to overcome challenges that we've seen to support safely managed drinking water services. So with that, I think this community knows that safe drinking water is critical for health, for the economic benefits, and good for society as a whole. And so just to illustrate just a couple examples. So one, we know that drinking water contributes to a huge number of illnesses and deaths. That includes a big majority, including with inadequate sanitation and hygiene, a big majority of deaths from diarrhea, with 1.5 million people still dying from diarrhea each year. In terms of economic benefits, the effects at the individual level, but also at the country level, there's huge economic returns with investments of safe drinking water. It was estimated from about 3.4 for the benefit cost ratio in urban settings to 6.8 in rural settings. Also, it's a win-win for society as a whole, as well as for ecosystems. If you think about particularly the aspects looking at freshwater resources, so water resource management, activities at the water resources management level, it's going to have wider benefits, impacting water quantity as well as water quality. And the report will include some examples showing some good practices, including one in Beijing, China. So we heard that we need dramatic progress to increase acceleration for safely managed drinking water. We do have 74% of the population that does have access, but still 2 billion people do not have such access. And we heard from Kellyanne the need to accelerate quadruple times the current rates of progress to achieve safely managed drinking water services. but yet that is a global average, and there's huge disparities where certain settings there needs to be even greater acceleration. So if you look at, for example, in rural settings, or looking at for sub-Saharan Africa, and another example in the JMP report is least developed countries where they need 10 times the rate of acceleration. Oh, sorry. And then one other point I just wanted to highlight is in terms of water quality. So the JMP report, it highlights that many settings that water quality, it needs to be improved. There's fecal contamination, it's widespread. But I think it's important to point out that the JMP estimates for water safety, including based on the current methods, including use of snapshot data on from household surveys, it likely overestimates the percent of people that have safe drinking water. But we do have interventions. We have interventions from source to consumer, as well as risk assessment, risk management approaches that are proactive and comprehensive, like water safety planning. So as mentioned, we have the data and estimates for access, but then we also need to look at what are the policies in place and implementation of those policies and finances and human resources. And here we're showing you some new data that's coming out of the UN Water GLAAS country survey. So the report is going to be published in December 2022. So this is the first group that's probably seeing some of this upcoming data. And it reinforces that we need to put more to human and financial resources. So from this survey, where 107 respondent countries, there were 107 respondent countries, only 7 out of 107 countries said that they had adequate financial and human resources. So with that, Kellyanne also highlighted that the current progress we have is also threatened. There is a concern for reversal of progress because of many threats, including climate change. So with the increased intensity, frequency of events for droughts, for flooding, etc., this could undermine the progress that we have. So we need to take action, and addressing climate change is really a no regrets action. There's an estimate in this upcoming report from the World Bank, which shows that the investment in the added resilience to water supply system, it's a 1% cost of the total infrastructure costs that are needed to achieve the SDG 6.1 from 2020 to 2030. So certainly it's no regrets, it's a low cost, and over the long term, it's going to be cost effective. So with the situation that we're in, I think though, we need to remember that we can make progress, that acceleration is possible. And there's many inspiring examples of countries that have made great progress in going towards achieving safely managed drinking water for all. And so we have a UN Water SDG6 Global Acceleration Framework, which highlights actions in 5 different areas. And these are governance, financing, capacity development, data and innovation, data and information and innovation. And we need to work on all of those to achieve SDG 6.1. And the report is structured around these accelerators in terms of the recommendations. So now we're going to get into the more exciting bit about the recommendations and hand it over to Jorge.
Thank you, Jennifer. Well, I'm glad to be here today with so many people in the room and many people that I'm afraid couldn't make it. So I think you are among the privileged that can have this snapshot on the upcoming State of Drinking Water report. An important element of the report are the recommendations that we are giving to governments and also to other stakeholders in the sector. And I hope I will move the slides correctly. Yes. So the overarching recommendations, or the recommendations that we include in the report, are structured along the 5 SDG6 accelerators that Jennifer just presented on governance, financing, capacity development, data and information, and innovation. On the first one, on governance, the overarching recommendation will focus on strengthening governance, strengthening institutions, on regulation, a key element that I have heard a lot during these days at the Water Week, on coordination, and on filling institutional gaps. There are still gaps in institutions, in legal frameworks that need to be filled. On the second accelerator, on financing, yes, we need more money, but we also need to spend the always limited resources in a more efficient way. We need to make sure that we take advantage of leveraging public funds with private funds. We revise tariffs. We make sure that we take advantage of all the different sources of funding and financing available. On the third accelerator, on capacity development, we've been talking for many years about developing capacities, and developing capacities is often limited to trainings. We need to think beyond trainings. We need to build robust institutions in public entities. We need to build robust utilities, service providers, and that goes beyond trainings. That goes beyond superior education. I believe that vocational training is critical to make sure that those who are operating systems, in particular in rural areas, have the capacities that they need to provide those services. On data and information, I think these days we have heard a lot as well on the use of data and information, the need to have more data, more national monitoring systems, but also on the use of these data to understand gaps, inequalities. There is still a lot of gaps of information. For those who attended the previous session on healthcare facilities, I think is one of the advocacy points. And the last point on innovation and ensuring that we embrace innovation, we use the innovation, and we adopt innovation quickly in the sector. So allow me to just give you a glimpse of some of the specific recommendations for each of those SDG6 for each of those SDG6 accelerators. Under governance, as I mentioned earlier, strengthening regulators, creating regulators, introducing regulatory reforms is critical, and is missing in many countries, and is insufficient in many countries. And regulation should also cover some elements of user protection, in particular if we want to really address leaving no one behind. On the second example of specific recommendations under finance, as I said, tariff setting is to me the elephant in the room in many countries. It is always unpopular to raise tariffs, but if we don't kind of combine a full cost recovery or covering at least of basic operation and maintenance in systems with leaving no one behind, and with making sure that the tariffs are affordable, if we cannot match this equation, we are failing. We either don't have utilities that are sustainable over time, or we are missing a proportion of the population that cannot afford the tariffs for the services that we are putting in place. On capacity development, as I mentioned, we need to go beyond trainings. We need to build robust institutions in the public sector that goes to revise, things such as how can we lift the salaries in ministries that have a lot of turnover of staff because of low salaries and because of competition from the private sector. It goes to vocational training, as I said earlier, and making sure that the capacities go to everyone that is involved in the sector. That is millions of people all over the world, not just the people that can afford coming to the Water Week. On data and information, as I said earlier, is putting data collection, monitoring at the service of the people that can use this. There are gaps in terms of availability of information, but often the time, even when there is information, that information is not used. There is a nice publication, but nobody is making decisions based on the information that is available. And the last but not least, on innovation. We need to embrace innovation, and we need to make sure that governments identify innovations and bring them to scale. There is a lot of piloting, there is a lot of very successful stories that cannot move to the next level, and this is where we need governments to really identify those innovations and to bring them to scale. I will stop here, and I will pass the floor to my colleague Joel from the World Bank, who will maybe reflect on some of the recommendations and show you the next steps.
Okay. Next slide. Thank you. So on reflection, a couple points. I promise to be brief. There was a slide, we've talked a lot about tariffs. People are concerned about affordability. And I just want to points, tariffs aren't the only way to get at affordability. We have subsidies. And we know that we're not spending our subsidy money very well. We've recently completed a study that showed about 56% of the $320 billion used on subsidies is going to the 80th percentile and above. So despite all kinds of intentions, that public money to deal with affordability is going to the highest income. At the same time, our execution of public budgets is also not so great. The health and social sector and money that's budgeted in a budget, we looked at about 65 countries over a 15-year period. The execution rate is close to 99%. In water and irrigation, our execution rate is 72%. That means that money is budgeted in national budgets, trickling down to the subnational level. We're leaving the equivalent of 28 cents per dollar on the table. So you want to talk about affordability, these are all factors that undermine our ability to address the poor, and certainly undermine our ability to bring more financing from the private sector in. If we're not spending our public resources appropriately, it's very difficult to start attracting private money in. So there's a lot more in this report we can talk about. There is a very, I'm going to hit the wrong button, no doubt, because I always do. Okay. There's a very ambitious program here to roll this out. We look forward. I'm sorry, this is a bit of a teaser. I hope it got you excited about the study, but there are a couple of highlights that I want to point out. Obviously, we're here today in Stockholm. Very soon, the report will be released in New York in October. So there's a lot of work going on to finish this up. There'll be a more detailed discussion at the University of North Carolina conference that occurs in October. And then there's a number of different events that are leading up to the 2023 conference in March. It also brought, prior to that, it goes into the synthesis report for SDG6. So there's a lot of work to be done. But there's been a lot of work that's been put into this. So I want to thank my colleagues, and I thank you all for your interest on this. And now I think if I understand the program right, I'm supposed to segue into the minister's discussion. So Minister, if you could please come up and join me. I don't know how to take this slide down. Okay, nobody else does either. Okay, I apologize. First of all, I need to point out that while the minister is here, he's also part of the water family. I've looked at his CV, and he's a dam expert. He's got degrees in water resource management, has been working in the profession. So I will treat you with the respect that a minister deserves, but more impressive in this room is your technical skills. And I think we really appreciate that and look forward to a dialogue based on that, because your expertise in this and your knowledge across the board is really what we want to try to pick up on. So if that's okay. No, you've got a lot of expertise. It's a very impressive resume. So Minister Al-Hamadan has been the minister since 2020, but worked in the sector in Iraq for a number of years, also has worked overseas, been on international councils. So he brings a wealth of information. Just to put this in the context, while this report is talking about water and sanitation, in the Iraqi context, you actually have two ministries in place. You have water resource management, and then you have the water supply. We're going to talk a little bit about the relationship between the two, and we don't have much time because I know you're very busy, but I wanted to ask you two questions, and please, I wish we had a couple hours because there's a lot more I'd like to ask you. But we know there are quality issues in the Iraqi context as well as water quantity issues. And I'm hoping you could just explain a little bit in the mic, I'm told,
Okay.
about some of the biggest challenges in both of these around quality and around quantity, and what your strategy is to address those.
Yeah, thank you very much. And it's honor to me to be here and participate in very important events. And yes, drinking water quality and quantity, it is our biggest challenge. Currently is more effect because the drought, but we believe that the whole people in the world, and especially in Iraq, have the right to reach water for drinking. So in our case in Iraq, we already have a roadmap, what we called it the Swillery. Swillery, it's a strategical study for land and water development in Iraq. So we have a roadmap until 2035. So we are familiar with our situation, but unfortunately, and that strategy was complete in 2014, is not focused on a climate change factor. So we need to update it now and include very important factor as climate change. But in that strategy, we know our situation in 2035, especially in water for drinking. And we put in our consideration that is the first priority for Ministry of Water Resources to allocate water, drinking water, and then the industry and the water for agriculture. Of course, water for agriculture is consumed more than 80% from our water, but in our priority to focus on allocate or provide enough water for the whole people. In fact, it's not possible to have, it's not possible to cover more than 40 million people in Iraq to have a drinking water, especially in current situation. But we try to deliver drinking water by using tankers, and it's a way that we can help the people. When we talk about the water quality and water quantity, of course, Iraq is located downstream two major rivers. So more than 85% from his water resource coming from outside Iraq. So any development, any irrigation development in the upper part country without consultant to the Iraq's water, mean there is very negative impact goes to Iraq based on the quality, the first issue, and the quantity. So last year, 10 years or maybe 15 years, the upper part country, they are developing their irrigation projects. And when they are developing their irrigation projects, it's mean they are very reduced in terms of quality, not quantity, because we don't care about the quantity without good quality. Before that, before the last 15 years, we receive water as a good quality, and we have some entire problem, of course, in Iraq until now. But now is more complicated because we receive water with a bad quality from the border. And then because we are a downstream and we are an arid and semi-arid, so it's not easy for us to deal with that issue. So we are working with the neighbors to reach an agreement, to reach a way in order to decrease the water pollution, let's say. So we are working on it, and also we are looking for to achieve SDG6 in 2030. We try to do that, and since 2 years, what we are doing is looking for a new framework, a new legislation. So based on our situation and based on our roadmap, we believe we need to do many things. The first one, we need to reduce water for irrigation by change the irrigation system. So we are working now to change what we call an open channel system to the closed system. It's mean deliver water by using pipeline. It's inexpensive, but it is okay because this is the way that we believe maybe we can facing the new, the biggest challenges as the first one is the climate change. And the second one, the development irrigation projects in the upper country.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I have a couple more questions for you. You've touched on transboundary. I know we could talk about that all day, but I don't want to touch on that one. I want to focus on what you mentioned at the very end, kind of climate change.
Yeah.
How that's occurring, really how that's impacting on the ag sector, and then what the implications are for water and sanitation. You mentioned that 80% of the water is going to food
Yes.
production.
Yeah.
We know we're in a global food crisis. We know importing food is getting more and more expensive. That obviously puts a lot of pressure downstream on urban and household use. And what are the plans to kind of address that? And how do you see that being resolved in the long term?
Yeah, based on our strategy, we need to have full cooperation. I mean, not cooperation, what we call integrated. So we need to have a full cooperation with the Ministry of Agriculture, because they have a full responsibility to change their agriculture system in order to, I mean, saving water, and maybe we can increase also the productivity for the agriculture. And also we need to have a full cooperation, because our strategic strategy is cover all the stakeholders, all the parties, not just Ministry of Water Resources, but because our responsibility for management that water, we are not, our responsibility to manage based on quality and quantity and distribute water and allocate raw water to the intakes, to the network for drinking. So we are working together in order to enhance, their procedure using water. And also we are focusing on with the Ministry of Environmental and Municipalities to have a wastewater treatment plant in order to reduce the damage with the climate change. And also we have another challenge that we are facing, because our strategical study completed 2014. And the recommendation for that study, it's mean we need to update it after 5 years, the first 5 years. What is happening in Iraq during the first 5 years, there is an ISIS, and there are many destroyed for some irrigation projects, dams.
Right.
So we spent the first 5 years to rehabilitation our irrigation projects. And now it's mean we lost the first 5 years. So now we are working with an international consultant company to update that study in order to reach our situation in 250.
Mm-hmm.
That is what we are looking for. And again, with our focus to allocate water for drinking to the old people.
Okay.
Okay.
I have one more question for you. Wearing your
Say
very sorry, I know I'm taking advantage
Please
of
be
you.
free.
I want to take advantage of your technical hat. You've touched on several times this integration issue, and one of the challenges I think the wash sector in particular is known for is sometimes we're a little stovepipe. Sometimes we only look at the last mile and we don't really look upstream. You are upstream, and you've mentioned agriculture, environment,
I'm not
urbanization.
upstream. I'm not
No,
upstream.
you in your ministry, you are responsible for
Yes.
bulk and really looking at the whole thing.
Yeah.
The wash world sometimes ignores that. And there are messages that you've delivered. I wanted to give you an opportunity to kind of reflect a little bit about that. You spend a lot of time talking with other ministries. You've touched on transboundary. It's a very complex set of circumstances that you're dealing with. And you've talked a lot about integration and collaboration. What are the implications on that downstream at the last mile, at the pipes? What can the wash people do to make your life easier? Is it demand side management? Is it better financing? Sorry, I don't mean to put you on the spot.
Yeah,
but
maybe increase their awareness. It's better than, this is our biggest challenge, because Iraq previously suffering from flooding. So what we have previously flood management. Now we need to have a drought management. And this is a fact we need to deal with.
Right,
So this is a new factor.
right,
It's not easy to the people to explain to them. There is no more water like before.
right.
You need to dealing with the water as a good cell. It is not like anything. It is alive.
Right.
So there is a fund. There is, but it's actually it's not 100% our responsibility.
Right.
So we need, media, World Bank, all the parties or the stakeholders, all our partners. We need to sit together and try to do something about explain what's the water important for the people.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you
very
Thank
much.
you.
and
Thank you very
for
much.
giving me the liberty of one more question. I really appreciate that.
Thank
Thank you very much.
you.
Thank
Thank
you. Thank you. Okay, so now we're gonna go to the granular end of it, the real where the rubber hits the road. I want to ask Peter, and Mary is online, is that right? She's magically gonna appear and this is all gonna work perfectly. And then Joseph, you're in the room as well. How are you? Peter? Please. Yes, I want everybody. We're gonna have a dialogue. No, I need you here. I have lots of questions for you. So first of all, welcome. I'm gonna ask Mary too, but Peter, Joseph, I know you're probably, this is maybe your first event in your new position, is that right? First global event. So many people know Peter's previous predecessor, Robert Gukubia, who was kind of the dean of regulators in East and Southern Africa in Africa. And knowing Robert, I suspect he's online and he may tune in if I say something wrong. And Joseph, you've been in the position for how long?
6 months now.
6 months. Okay. So you have it all down. You've got this completely under control, right? Peter, you're with the utility, right? And you want to explain a little bit about your role, the regulator, sorry, as well. You want to explain a little bit about your role and what the role of the regulator is?
I'll do that. So it's not going to have, yeah.
You can do it now.
Okay.
Sorry, the mic. Yes.
Okay, so good morning, everyone. My name is Peter Mtale. I'm the Chief Inspector at the National Water Supply and Sanitation Council, NWASCO, which is the regulator of water supply and sanitation services in Zambia. Of course, I sit on a lot of international organizations. I think one of them is a strategic advisory group for WHO and UNICEF.
Right.
Yeah, and also other international committees. I've been here a number of times.
I know,
So
many times.
yeah. So basically, a chief inspector, you're like in charge of operations at a regulator. So that is a lot of actually work. Yeah.
Mary, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
And we can even hear you. Welcome. How are you?
I'm very good. And you?
We're good. We're jealous that we're not in Kenya, or some of us are. Sorry.
I'm also jealous I'm not there.
Okay, good. So, Mary, you are the CEO, is that right? Or the managing director in Moranga South, right?
Yes.
So you are responsible for everything related to water.
I'm responsible for everything in Moranga South, from management to operation and maintenance, to policy formulation and ensuring they are implemented. Hello?
Yeah, can you hear
Yes.
me? Okay,
Yes,
I know
I
you've
can
had a
hear.
chance. I know you've had a chance to look at the report. I want to, since I have you online and it's working, I wanted to
Yeah.
jump in and ask you a couple very quick questions that I hope you can touch on. So
Yeah.
the first one is I really want to ask you about your finances and what the status is in light of the food crisis, in light of inflation, in light of the downturns related to COVID, and how you've weathered the storm in terms of your operations and the implications on your financing. And then I also want to talk a little bit about, I know you're very focused on staff development and capacity building. And we'd like to hear a little bit more about what you're doing in that regard.
Okay, thank you very, very much. I want to say hi to everybody this morning and to indicate that we are doing well here in Murang'a South, that is in Murang'a County, Kenya. Now, Murang'a South covers actually 3 constituencies, almost half of the Murang'a County, and requiring a lot to do development. And because of this, we have tried to implement projects that can improve the services as well as assisting the utility to be financially stable. So what we are doing is that we are trying the best to ensure that we correct that our correction efficiency does not go below 95%. And at the same time, the bigger projects that will help us increase in accessibility to water and sanitation, we have actually engaged commercial financing to borrow money, and through Water Services Trust Fund that has been giving us subsidies from the World Bank, we have been able to implement quite a number of projects, and that has helped us to ensure that we have really improved in the accessibility of water by quite a number of people within our area of jurisdiction. We appreciate even our regulator. I can see my CEO is there, that he has really supported us even in some of these endeavors as we try to get proposals that are bankable. And the WASREB has been quite instrumental in helping in this. Again, it has also been very instrumental in the tariff issue, in coming up with the tariffs that are with a number of operations is sustainable. And so far we are doing well. And even during COVID, actually we were able to weather the storm because we were able also to encourage the people we serve that even with COVID, it's important to support the institution, to support the utility, and they have been paying. And since then, actually, the utility has improved quite a lot. Well, there is the challenge of food shortages and the lack of even finances, the economic instability and the inability of the people we serve. But they are very supportive also, understanding that water is crucial, and therefore they do everything within their ability to ensure that they pay. However, actually water provision is very important for them, and they understand that, because as far as health also is concerned, water contributes a lot. Our water is relatively good in terms of quality. The only challenge is availability. We don't have a lot of it. However, we also have a challenge with the non-revenue. It's a bit high, but we are working hard through some of these programs to ensure that we reduce it to recommendable levels. The staff development, I have about 200 of staff. We have a very robust program of building their capacity, of developing them to be able to do what is called of them to do. I have quite a number of engineers, qualified engineers, registered engineers that are doing these surveys, doing the designs, and finally putting up the proposals. Actually, as we get helped by WASREP and Water Service Trust Fund, I have a very able team that are able to do this. So that is what we have been doing, and that is what has kept us afloat, even to be able to serve. Currently serving for 68% of our coverage area in terms of the population. We still have about 32% to cover, and therefore we are still planning to pursue further even the public-private partnerships. I have actually engaged also in performance-based contracting to be helped to reduce the non-revenue. So that's what we are doing so far, and it is working well for us.
Thank you very much. I just want to repeat two things. Collection rates over 95%. And you were already done, you've already done commercial borrowing on the domestic market, is that right?
Yes. Yes, that is right. We have actually had 3 projects done with commercial financing.
Okay, great. Thank you very, very much. I may come back to you, but I just want that to sink in with everyone.
Okay.
And part of the responsibility for that is not only with the water service provider, but the role of the regulator in Kenya. There is not an antagonistic relationship. In fact, there's quite a supportive relationship. And Joseph, you have the water index, which really looks at the creditworthiness of the water service providers. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, thank you very much. In fact, the biggest mandate for the water services regulatory board in Kenya is to protect the interest of the Kenyan citizenry, particularly towards access to water and dignified sanitation. What WASREP has done is to identify specific key performance indicators, which must be undertaken by the public and private water service providers. We have 88 public water service providers in Kenya and 3 private water service providers in Kenya. But then they cover about 15% of the urban population in Kenya, while we still have very many unregulated, almost 6,000 schemes in the whole country. And that is where we are heading to now, so that we ensure that in terms of the key performance indicators towards access to water and also dignified sanitation, there must be a roadmap towards achieving those standards as we forge towards achieving this SDG6. And WASREP has really been ensuring that much of the mandate of service delivery is with the county governments. And the role of the national government, that is the Ministry of Water, through its parastatal, that is the Water Services Regulatory Board, is to ensure that we enforce the standards. We also ensure that at least we give out licenses and also review their tariffs. One good thing in Kenya is that before we give a license, we must undertake the mandatory public consultation with the, with the consumers. That is for one, so that at least, we get their public acceptance that a regulate the water service provider should be given a license. And when it comes to the issues of the tariff, we must also consult them so that at least we have their opinion. Though the Kenyan government also directs that there must be an affirmative action on the proposal. During the COVID period, the Kenyan government ensured that even those residents who are in the slum areas, they were given free water. We are very happy with the World Bank. They gave the Kenyan government $48 million for conditional liquidity financing. And for that money, what the Kenyan government did through WASREP and the Water Sector Trust Fund was to ensure that we supported about 12 water service providers. The benchmark was, it must be a water service provider who is well regulated and well, supervised by WASREP, so that at least we ensure that those funds were put into the right use and they were able to account, and also they had to demonstrate that they've increased access to water, and also they are not using much of that money for their operation and maintenance while least, to ensure that they do quality access to water and also to bring down the non-revenue water. In Kenya, we are losing about 45% of water through the non-revenue water.
Right.
And we are losing, that's almost 10.5 billion every year. It's really quite a lot of money.
Right.
Yeah.
Just to note, we're equally appreciative of groups like USAID and our other donors who helped us design that liquidity facility. I have one question for you. You mentioned 88 utilities, public utilities.
Yes.
How many of them do you deem creditworthy? Approximately.
Out of the 88, the ones whom we can comfortably recommend to any public entity that they are creditworthy, there are 20.
Okay,
There
so about
are 20.
25%.
Yeah.
You also have a big award ceremony. There's all kinds of incentives for people to up their key performance indicators, right? Great, okay. Can we talk a little bit about Zambia? Please, tell us a little bit about kind of the governance arrangements, the role of the regulator, what some of the challenges are, and what your opportunities going forward might be.
Yeah, so thank you very much. Yeah, when you come to Zambia, we do have strong governance systems. I think our minister was talking about issues of governance yesterday when he was presenting. We do have a regulator in place, and we have been operating since 2000. So in Africa, we are among the earliest regulators. And in terms of the work that we do, we actually license all these commercial utilities across the country. And then for all the other service providers that would want to work with us, they work under the commercial utilities so that they sign some sort of contract. It's a PPP arrangement, which is like a service management lease contract. So we have such arrangements. So our role is not just to look at regulating the services, but also the economic side of it.
Right.
So we also look at tariffs, ensure that the tariffs are cost recovery, not cost reflective, but cost recovery.
Right.
Yeah, I know people understand that. Yeah, so the issue is that if you're a good regulator, as my colleague said, you have to be a proper regulator. So you need to look at all the consumers, regardless of where they are. So in our case, like in Zambia, since we started regulating in 2000, we were regulating just urban and the peri-urban areas. But we saw the challenge that if we are to meet the SDG by 2030, we need to regulate the rural areas where we have got small supplies. So in 2018, we sat as a country, of course, spearheaded by NWASCO, we came up with the regulations, how we're going to provide services in rural areas and how we're going to regulate. So what we actually have done now is that we have amended all the operating licenses for commercial utilities to include rural areas. Of course, it's not easy. I know that most of the regulators fear to go into rural areas. I don't know my colleague from WASLEP, but we cannot ignore this important area. We find that mostly in Africa, the rural areas actually are larger than the urban areas. So if you don't regulate, actually you see them lagging behind, and that's what we saw. So with what we have done now, we have developed tools, we have developed systems, and we have ensured that we slowly start doing this. We are coming up with small schemes. We regulate small schemes because most of the rural areas we find that they're hand pumps, but also want to see how we can commercialize these hand pumps, but to put solar systems so that, we can even put a prepaid arrangement. We are not saying people in rural areas cannot pay, Those people, they also make some money. We just have to make sure that the cross-subsidy arrangement is made better. When you're a human being, you live, you don't exist. So to earn a living, there is let me put it this way. Yeah, there is a responsibility to earn a living. If somebody asks you a question, say, where do you exist? Just know that you have a problem. They have to ask you, where do you live? So any living has got a responsibility. So even in the rural areas, we expect the people to have some responsibility in terms of contributing towards that. So we have been actually meeting with different stakeholders so that we implement this rural regulation well. So I think that's where we are in terms of rural regulations. We thought this is a very important step. And maybe just to emphasize, we want to start with three most important things. One, we want to collect data. We have to make sure that the data for rural areas is up to date. We also want to look at issues of water quality, because normally what happens, maybe a hand pump is done and maybe they are forgotten. We want to look at issues of water quality monitoring. Then the third important part that we want to look at is the issue of service standards, because we just assume, okay, everything is okay, but want to focus on that. And then eventually we'll look at other issues that are there. So for the rural part, maybe that's what I can say for now. Unless there will be any issue, then I can clarify that. Yeah, so maybe I can also talk about issues of data collection, just a little bit.
You can talk it only if you talk about the integrity of data collection.
Oh, okay, yeah. That could be also important. I think there is one recommendation that is coming out strongly that governments should institutionalize data collection. And I think that's a very important recommendation, because without data, even as a regulator, you can't regulate. How do you regulate without data? So for us, what we have done basically is to develop a tool based on the GMP questions. And we have circulated to all the people that are supposed to collect data, so that at the end of the day, we get uniform data. Even our Zambia Statistics Agency, we have given them the same question. So they are doing the census, national census now, and they're asking the same questions. So what we want at the end of the day is that this information is put together and used for decision making. So if somebody does data collection at a lower level, we should be able to aggregate up to national level, because the questions, the methodology, and everything is the same. And I think that's a very, very commendable recommendation that is coming from the report.
You've been very busy for an organization that's only been around for 2.5 years. It's very impressive what you've done. Okay, so we're going to move over to the next session, but I really want to thank you all. And Joseph and Mary, I cannot say how impressive I think we are in what you're doing. It's, you know, WASREP is clearly one of the leaders on the subcontinent and globally in emerging markets on what a regulator can do and how it can transform a sector and really hold people accountable while also being supportive. You make it very evident that a regulator can be your friend, and not many service providers feel that way. And Mary, thank you for emphasizing that point, and congratulations for the tremendous work you're doing. And we look forward to coming and visiting you and replicating that across the subcontinent. So thank you very much to the three of you.
Thanks a lot, Joe. Yes. So thanks, everyone. I mean, this is, and thank you also for just listening to the insights of our government representatives. And certainly in the report, the government leadership comes first. So we heard from the Iraqi minister that about policies and strategy and a bit of visioning and some longer term risks. We also heard the challenges associated with on the ground regulation. So what I'd like to do now to do a little transition is to talk about, and this kind of involves, I think, everyone to some extent, but how do we support governments in this task of leading us through to accelerated service provision for drinking water? So I have a panel, and I'm going to ask the panel to come up. I'll introduce the panel, and I'm going to give them the choice of whether they want to sit down. I don't know if you can see that in the video, and I'm getting the thumbs up. So first, I would like to invite Patrick Moriarty. So he's the CEO of IRC. And I also think he has really incredible insights to give as the chair of Sanitation and Water for All Steering Committee, which has been grappling with some big questions, over years. So Patrick, please come up with your chair. I would also like to invite Mira Mehta, and Mira will have the chair for you. You don't have to haul the couch up. And Mira is, she's a professor at CEPT University, and she's been working with us and other institutions for many years on financing. And lastly, I would like to introduce Carolina Tornesi-McKinnon, and she works with Xylem as a senior analyst, but she's also president of the World Youth World Youth Parliament for Water. So I think we could get some interesting perspectives from them. So we could try to arrange ourselves here in any order that you would like. And maybe I'll start with you, Patrick. And I know that there's some issues that you're always wanting to make sure are not omitted, but when you think about some of the comments that were given, right, and the reflections from a minister and from some of these government regulators, and also the recommendations, what do you feel like are sort of catalytic actions we can undertake to help our governments contribute and support governments in this mission? Are there things, do we need to change our approach? Are there things that we should stress that haven't been part of this discussion? So over to you. Yeah. Oh, sorry.
I'm staying sitting. When you're 2 meters tall, you don't want to stand beside. You just. So no, thanks very much, Bruce, and thanks everybody. I think this has been for me an exciting session so far, because exactly what you've said. You're hearing the minister, hearing regulators, hearing service providers, but let me start. You circulated. I'm not sure, yeah, to us anyway. You circulated a sneak preview of the report, and you put up the 5 recommendations. But you have an overarching recommendation above those 5, which is that in essence that we need to lift water, sanitation, hygiene up the political agenda. And I think we've been talking for years among ourselves. We're talking here, we're professionals, we're sector professionals. We know it, we want to do better within the sector. I think the recommendations are fantastic for that. But what we've increasingly realized over the last few years is that without getting the politicians on board, we talk about government in very big terms, but of course government often has, there's a political part, there's a technocratic part, and I think often we're much more comfortable working in the technocratic part, but actually we can't leave the political part out. So I think that's a really important key message in the executive summary of the report, but maybe one that we don't always emphasize enough. Sanitation and water for all. Many of you are members, 350 members, hosted by UNICEF, the global partnership championing access to all for water and sanitation. And, I think everyone sitting here is, or all of you who are members, and everyone in this room, I think, is a member of one of the constituencies we have, governments, research and learning organizations, CSOs and NGOs, regulators, and utilities, the private sector, external support agencies. So that's also a very big question, how should we behave differently? I think that many of us, for me, the report is actually, I think we should continue to make the changes that we're changing. If you look at what it is that we commit to as members of Sanitation and Water for All, it is to follow government leadership. It is to coordinate our actions together. It is to engage in system strengthening with a particular focus on finance. We all like to talk about finance. We've been talking about it. But what I love hearing is when people say, it's not as simple as we don't have enough money. We don't have enough money, but we're also not spending the money that we do have properly. And I think that leads us onto a critical aspect of the system strengthening agenda. We've been, my organization has been championing system strengthening for the last 10 years plus. Many of us, and that again, it's lovely to see it all coming through into these global reports now. But I think increasingly what we're seeing is that system strengthening is hugely important. But where it really becomes concrete is in a professionalization agenda. Exactly what we've heard being talked about from Kenya and from Zambia just now, moving beyond community management, moving beyond hand pumps being managed by ad hoc committees that are set up and then collapse a year or two later, to professionally managed services, safely managed water services worthy of the name, that are being provided by professional service providers who are being regulated under an umbrella that's been provided by a ministry that is empowered and has access to data. And I think all of us, you say, how do we need to change? Those of us who aren't already supporting that agenda need to start supporting that agenda. Those of us who are supporting that agenda need to redouble our efforts. So that's what I would like to share.
No, thank you so much, Patrick. And I think that part of the discussion will be about how do we carry and move this political kind of getting political will to those that maybe haven't been reached. And maybe we could talk a little bit about SWA and their role in doing that. But I'd like to shift also to Mira. And Mira, I have a couple specific questions for you, and they relate to Patrick's comments about political commitment a little bit. When we think about the barriers to financing water supply, we heard a lot about that. What's needed to ensure the political commitment to allocate that adequate public funding for universal coverage? And also just would like to also know if you can handle a second question. How should these allocations be designed? For example, should we leverage more resources? How do we ensure sustainability? So kind of an open question, but the floor is yours.
Thanks, Bruce. It's a bit difficult to, I've been hearing so much about regulations, utilities, and I come from a country where actually we don't have many utilities per se, but we have local governments. And it's the local governments that provide these services of water supply, sanitation, solid waste, and so on. So I think there is a slight, maybe difference in terms of outlook of who is the service provider. And I think we need to bear that in mind. And I will come to that later. But to the first question that Bruce posed in terms of how do we get political sort of priority assigned to these sectors, both water, today we are talking of water, but both water and sanitation. I come from India, where I guess most of you would have heard about the massive programs that are going on. And we also sometimes wonder as to where is this priority coming from. But it's a political priority that is being placed not so much on these efficiency improvements and good management. I'm not saying those are not important, but to get political priority for the sector, it is really universal access. Everybody has these services. Everybody has water. The new program that Government of India has just now introduced, just 1 year back, is in Hindi. In our language, it is called Har Ghar Jal or Nal Se Jal, which means that every house will have a tap and they will get water from their own tap. And it's a very simple sounding kind of, but that's the kind of thing that will actually generate political priority. I was asking my team when Bruce asked me, I said, let me find out what allocations have been made to this program for the next 5 years. And I myself was quite amazed. The number is 100 billion over 5 years for water supply programs in India. And the major focus is not only a tap in every house. There are also other aspects to the program. But why this much allocation has happened is mainly because of the kind of political priority that can come from this very simple argument. We were talking of regulators. I remember one of the regulators, I won't name him, when we had a webinar at the start of pandemic. Yeah. And we said that, do you have something that you think you regret not having done? And he said, I regret that we did not reach, and this is regulator from Africa. I regret that we did not reach the poor enough. And that is actually coming out in the pandemic, really very, very starkly. So I think these are reaching everyone, reaching the poorest of the poor is something that will drive political priority. I think I'm not saying only India, what I've heard, and I don't know enough about that, but Nigeria is taking up a very similar program also. So that is one aspect. Second thing that in India, besides political priority, the regulatory framework, but not of the type that regulators we are talking about, but the national level, National Green Tribunal, which is a regulator at the national level, they have set out very strict terms in terms of the way the wastewater or the used water is the terminology we now use can be reused. and what is the level of treatment that it needs to be given. And this is now being sort of not imposed, but being taken up by state government and local governments. So regulation also plays a role, but I'm arguing that regulation need not be only utility and regulator. It can also be this. And my understanding is, I was just asking Dinesh, I think even in the US, probably EPA probably plays a similar role. So these are sort of measures that are very, very important in terms of, and because of the NGT, the National Green Tribunal, what they have said in terms of what all local governments have to achieve, the public allocations are now increasing also in not only in water supply, but in used water management. So these are very, very important. The second point that I wanted to make, if I may, is that we need to emphasize on improving local resources. And by that, I mean local government resources. We are talking of tariffs all the time. But what about taxes? Because all countries in the world, I think, have local, well, I don't know whether all have, but most, I guess, have local governments and they have local taxes. Most of them have property tax, for example. And I saw a recent study for Africa. So it's not only US and India and other countries that we are familiar with, but most countries have. How well are we doing on property taxes? We talked of 90% recovery rate on water tariffs. What about your property taxes? Because property taxes are, what are they meant for? They are meant for water supply, sanitation, local roads. So why are we not looking at these taxes, at these resources, and why are we not talking of collection efficiency of these resources also? So that's the second. And third thing I wanted to highlight was that maybe we need to look beyond these PPPs. I was very happy to see Joel's recent blog where he says, in fact, most of the PPPs of the large type have not really worked. So why are we not looking at, but we do need to leverage public resources. Even if we increase public resources, we need to leverage, we need to bring in more funds. US has done it through municipal bond market. I was looking at numbers. Last year, 240 billion. And most of that goes, not all of it, but large proportion does go to water supply, sanitation, sewerage, and some to roads and things also. 4.1 trillion outstanding municipal debt. What are we talking about? Why are we not doing this? Why are we not accessing this? India actually has tremendous potential. India has a relatively well-developed financial sector. I think 20 years ago or something, we started this whole program on looking at municipal bonds, credit rating of municipal bonds. I think you were asking him about shadow rating. But in fact, we have in India very good credit rating agencies that actually do. Yeah,
they're all invested in it with their pensions, mortgages, and insurance companies.
Yeah, exactly. But then why are we not tapping these resources for the sector? How do we do this? Why are municipal bonds in India, despite their potential, not being taken up? Last 20 years, I just asked my colleagues, 37 bonds only. Why? There is great potential. And those 37 bonds, there has never been any delays in paying the interest, let alone default of. So there is, these local governments are, I remember the case of Joburg, when the Joburg, I'll stop with that, but Joburg, the CEO, I guess, actually said in one of his presentations that when they wanted to mobilize funds from the market, they said, I cannot do separately for my water utility, but I can do as Joburg Municipal. And they had a plan for all of their activities. They mobilized funds from the market at relatively good rates. And this is something that is actually doable and needs to be promoted. I hope World Bank, WHO, UNICEF also start looking at these opportunities. And lastly, impact investments. There is huge prospects out there. We talk of all these benefits of water supply and sanitation. And there are lots of studies that show the kind of impact that are there on health and income, women's income, because they have more time, children's education, all kinds of benefits are there. But we are not able to tap impact investment. We have one sanitation
Yeah.
development impact bond. Maybe DIB is the wrong structure. I don't think that is I shouldn't say that. We have been trying that. But maybe it's a very expensive kind of structure to try out. Maybe there are other avenues. We started looking at ESG ratings for urban local governments and utilities. And why don't we do that? There is huge market for corporate debt. And that is what you will access. And ESG is something that is becoming a requirement for corporate debt.
Yeah.
So all I'm saying is let's open our vision wider in looking at and not get stuck with these PPP projects, which are not going to get you that much money anyway. So that's it from my end.
Thank you. Mira promised she was going to be passionate and challenge us, and she did that. And Patrick is always doing that. So Carolina, we got to be passionate here, and I'm sure you will be. But I mean, you know, this idea, Mira, water tap in every household, simple language to mobilize the politicians, and then this really interesting local government taxes and innovative financing and finding those sources that we aren't tapping. Amazing points. Carolina, I'm going to kind of ask you a similar question. You've heard now your two passionate panel members and also the governments and considering the report itself. And by the way, there's a stack of executive summaries, and you guys have come into a session that I guess they had to close the door to. So anyone who wants a little executive summary emailed to them, just come to us and we will send it to you. So it'll be worth your while. Now, sorry, back to you, Carolina, with your question.
Yeah, thank you. You guys were pretty hard to follow up, so I'll do my best. But it's kind of, you know, what can young people bring, but also just historically not recognized groups of the public. And I want to just start by quoting a colleague of mine, Naomi Plumier. If you haven't met her, you should. She's great. She said, "You need us as much as we need you." And I think that that's a great way to kick this off as we talk about how to bring water high priority. I'd like to kind of give a really concrete example. I think we have Manuel in the back. He's with Siwi. He has a vest on. He's a volunteer. And we wouldn't have these sessions without these volunteers. And it's you have to work for half the day and then you get half the day free for World Water Week. And it's a good example of how we can kind of help each other on a higher level of organizing, and we bring something and we get something out of it. I'd also like to quote from the Honorable Minister that was just here. He said, you know, I think you posed the question, how can we help? And he said, we need you to help us make it easier and to spread this. And so to do this, just speaking from a young perspective, I think even just the vocabulary is so complex to follow. I'm an engineer by background, and the UN jargon has me crazy. There's so much. It's like alphabet soup. You grab like a handful, throw it on the wall, and like you've got an organization or a paper or something to follow. And it's great because it shows there's a lot of passion and dedication and that people really care, and we're working together to solve this. But simplifying it, a simple ask, bringing it down to something that can be understood easily. You don't need a PhD to understand the UN system, because really, I know there's a lot of research and care and hard work that goes into it, but it's really missed unless you dive right in. I've been in my role for just over a year, and I'm just getting it, and it's still not perfect. And really what young people can bring is, I think we want to commit to supporting and championing these changes enthusiastically. I think there's kind of two sides of it. There's a frustration end where we're like, wow, we're still here, like 2030 is right there. The SDGs, we're not going to complete them in the timeline that maybe we had hoped, but I still think that we will. And I think young people and people who are historically left out of these conversations want to help and dedicate and commit and spread these messages and be a part of the solution. And so that's kind of what we bring from our end, this commitment, this dedication, even, you know, volunteer for half the day to be able to just even jump in and listen to these sessions because we either can't afford it or we don't have the access. And And on just a functional level, we've heard many times, we have to quadruple our efforts, and you can't quadruple without more people. So we do need to include more people. We need to bring people up to the level that we're talking at, or we need to bring the level that we're talking at down, to really have these efforts quadrupled. I think everyone in here is dedicated, but we're not enough people. We need more. And so just functionally, this message and the efforts in each country need to be spread. And I'd just like to highlight, you know, I think there are 5 themes. Yeah, the governance, financing, capacity development, data and information, innovation. Young people fall in all of those categories. It is not to, you know, be squared away into just innovation, because you know, tech boom, you guys got that. Youth is just like, is a birth date. It doesn't really mean that you are specifically into innovation or research or an academic. So I just wanted to remind that we can fit into all of these categories, and we really do want to help. But we need, you know, the hand to reach out, mentorship, opportunities to grow and learn. Like coming to World Water Week, I've learned so much. And maybe for you all, you sit in these sessions and you hear the same things, but as a little bit of an outsider of the world, I guess becoming an insider, I learn a lot, even if it's just a repeated message that you might be sick of. I'm like, oh, write that down and send that in an email later. So just to remind you of that. And yeah, I think that's really all I wanted to talk about, but we are here to make life easier, help spread this. Water is at the top of my agenda and other young people as well. And we want to spread that.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Carolina. And I know many of you have been in Stockholm sessions for 10, 15, sometimes even going further back. And I'm sure some of us are very familiar sitting on a chair, and then suddenly you find yourself, you know, higher up. And I see my friend Jeff, for instance. We were both young. Hopefully we're still handsome, but anyway. But it's true that when, say, the Iraqi minister, he talked about policies and visions that last to 2035, who's going to be leading those? Who's going to be dealing with the monitoring? And so I think it's a really great responsibility to understand, you know, the baton that is being passed now is given and taken up in a way that's really considered. So I wanted to thank you guys. I don't know, we may have time for a couple questions to you, but I'm going to turn it to Jeff. And I just wondered, Jeff, if just considering everything you've heard, if there's anything that you wanted to add to the discussion. Sorry. Putting you on the spot.
Thanks, Bruce. Nothing like being put on the spot. But no, really, it's been such a rich discussion. I think the thing that jumps out to me the most, thinking about some of the recommendations, is, you know, this is really collectively something that we even grapple. I know I represent USAID, but thinking about this from even a US perspective, Patrick, your comments on political prioritization, I know that these becomes kind of somewhat jargony, but thinking about what that actually means in practice, you know, we just passed in the past year a once in a generation infrastructure bill, and we're about to make a giant public allocation similar to what Mira was mentioning, that's taking place in India in the US, and the slog that takes to be able over decades to finesse the political system to be able to get something like that to pass is certainly not insignificant. So I think really reflecting on everybody having a part, kind of from youth advocacy, technocrats up to political, legislative stakeholders, that really for all of this to work, it goes beyond the jargon, and to make this a reality is really just something that takes the collective. And I know that certainly sounds a little bit trite, but to be able to get to these levels of finance and from a public perspective really does require that political prioritization, but being really specific about what that takes and keeping that longer term time horizon, I think is absolutely critical. So turn it back over to you.
No, thanks so much, Jeff. And that's the problem with. But wonderful comments as always from Jeff. And I'm just wondering, we have time for maybe I can take 2, maybe 3 questions or comments from the audience. I'll bring it over to you. Please introduce yourself.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jose. I'm from Guatemala and I'm at the University of Oxford. And I'm a junior rapporteur here. So if you said something, maybe highlighted in the Waterfront Daily tomorrow. So I just quickly want to resonate with Professor Mira in some ways. And it's more of a concern than a question, that all the conversation today has really assumed a very centralized paradigm to water supply. So in the same way that there was a call to look at more tools beyond tariffs, I also wanted to highlight kind of the possibility of looking into decentralized solutions to water supply, especially think of 2030s around the corner. And I think the fact that that wasn't really mentioned is a little concerning, in my opinion.
Fantastic points. And I think you will have the last word from the audience because I've mismanaged the time. But we will have a conclusion after you speak. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. My name is Philip Lansana from Sierra Leone. I'm the Minister of Water Resources. I'm very happy that you involve the young people in this discussion. In my country, we have placed education as, or call it human capital development, as the priority sector, because we believe that for a country to develop, you need to develop its people. If you compare other countries or even companies, the human capital tells the difference from one to the other. I have some few comments to make relating to the discussions today. One has to do with commercial financing. Somebody said that the companies are able to take loans. I want to know whether, in fact, it's devoid of the government or if the government has to give guarantees. I want to understand that. The other is to do with transboundary countries, where you have a basin shared by a number of countries. I just want to share experience from my own region. We have the Mano River Union, which comprises 4 countries, that is Sierra Leone, Liberia, Guinea, and Ivory Coast. What we do is we also bring on board issues relating to those water basins. So I think the minister is not here anyway, but if at all he is making use of the committee or regional committee or the regional organizations in that area, to be very good for him. The other is to do tariff. Our experience is that even though we are really improving on collecting tariffs on the various, in one particular company, the Guma Valley Water Company, which is responsible for water in the big city, is that we are able to cover for operations and maintenance. We are not able to cover for development initiatives. So I don't know whether any other person has got experience in using tariff to fund projects, development projects. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much. And that was very wise words. And I think there's a couple of questions that may take a little bit of time to unpack, but they're important observations about, getting these mobilizing finances and, if people are investing in them, like how do we guarantee it? And I think that has been a key question that we try to also address in the report. And it's one of our big barriers, I think, is Joel talked a lot about professionalizing services so that investors have some confidence. But I think with that, and I know you raised some other very important points, but I think we're going to have to close. And I would like to invite Johanna Bach, who's a senior policy officer. She's from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in the Netherlands. And she, please, do you want to do it from there? Okay. Okay. It's just online people.
Okay.
But I'll just stick it here and hopefully.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Bruce. And thank you very much, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, for giving me the opportunity to close this very inspiring and energizing session on a most important topic, and that's the access to safe drinking water. and also for the sneak peek that we're giving at the upcoming State of the World's Drinking Water Report that is to be launched on October 24th in New York, as already Kelly-Ann mentioned. I hope you can agree with me that we can conclude that we are looking forward to a very valuable and solid report as being based on the latest joint monitoring program and GLAAS evidence, and including recommendations from experts and ready to be implemented. The Netherlands is a major funding of the JMP and of GLAAS, and I recommend you use this report as your guiding partner up to 2030 as we're talking about drinking water. For me, there's actually no great news. It confirms more or less what we already know and how we should proceed to secure the human right to drinking water for all. But it's with this upcoming report, there's no excuse anymore not to act. Today, we have listened to discussions with delegated government representatives and other stakeholders. We heard about what the key findings from the report mean in terms of actions. For instance, improve regulation, make sure tariff setting is adequate and affordable, make decisions based on good data, and make sure that our subsidies reach the proper target. And we also heard about the role property taxes can play. We also heard about drinking water issues in Iraq and how they are addressed, and the need to change the way people see water, considering the effects of climate change. And that in Kenya, the collection rates for water is 95%, and commercial borrowing is ongoing. And that's what we, as the government of the Netherlands, support very much. And not to forget the excellent work in Zambia. The importance of system strengthening, Patrick, and how the slogan, a tap in every house in India raised 100 billion. And I would like to stress the importance and the value of the commitment of young people. Reach out hands and give them opportunities to grow. We know that despite good progress, as Kelly-Ann already mentioned, we know that despite good progress, and as Kelly-Ann already mentioned, still 2 billion people lack access to safely managed drinking water, and that the world is not even close to being on track to meet SDG6 by 2030, despite it being a human right. But fortunately, we heard from Jennifer, there are also some hopeful takeaways for you. And that is, we can accelerate progress towards universal safe drinking water considerably, or dramatically, as she says. And we must. Safely managed drinking water supports health, socioeconomic development, and climate resilience. Actually, it's a basis for other SDGs to build on. And I like this narrative, and we should really share it more often and live washed up to the political agenda, as Patrick said. Progress requires action by governments, supported by development partners, on governance, finance, capacity building, data and innovation. We've heard it a couple of times today. And right, those are the accelerators of the SDG6 Global Acceleration Framework. And that brings me to the fact that Tajikistan and the Netherlands are co-hosting the UN 2023 Water Conference. Kelly-Ann already referred to this. And also here, the Global Acceleration Framework guides the route towards 2023. The co-hosts want the conference to be a watershed moment of the world, for the world, as Kelly-Ann, I'm echoing Kelly-Ann here. And the conference and its preparatory process to be inclusive, cross-sectoral, and action-oriented. Please assist us and mobilize your constituency and partners and spread the word. We can't do it alone. The main outcome of the conference will be the Water Action Agenda. Here we all can indicate commitments for action to strengthen the global water agenda. The register and the description are already live on the dedicated UN website, and I can share the link with Bruce, and maybe he can share it with you. I don't have it right now here. In my view, this provides an opportunity to link the State of the World's Drinking Water Report to the UN 2023 conference. It may inspire voluntary commitments for supporting access to drinking water. And in October, November 2022, we will take stock of the commitments. And maybe we invite you to present your commitment in New York during the conference, if we think it's very valuable or it's creative or whatever. It doesn't need to be big, as small is good, as long as there's commitment. And finally, the themes for the 5 interactive dialogues, one of them is water for health. That includes drinking water, will be presented during the PGA meeting on the 25th of October. Next week, an online consultation will be launched on the UNICEF website. And also this is an occasion for a sneak peek to inspire you to provide input. I've been I'm sorry for my long deliberations, but I would like to stop with saying that Tajikistan and the Netherlands are looking forward to partnering with you on the road to 2023, to the conference, but also beyond 2023, up to 2030. I would really like to thank the audience, the World Bank, UNICEF, and the WHO for this inspiring session. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great lunch. Thanks for your patience. Thank you guys so much. I think I forgot to thank you.